Before you put your fingers on the fret, visualize these strings from your eyes to your heart. You're bringing light into the darkness.
For years, Carlos Santana carried the weight of untold pain, silent betrayals, and moments of despair so deep he nearly gave up. 7 times. We saw the legend, the guitar icon who set Woodstock on fire, but we never knew the battles he fought when the music stopped. Now, at 77, he's breaking his silence, revealing the struggles that shaped his soul, his sound, and his survival. From a childhood shattered by trauma to a rise that defied all odds, from fame's highest peaks to the darkest corners of his mind. This is the untold story of Carlos Santana, a journey through heartbreak, redemption, and a comeback that rewrote music history. Carlos Santana's journey began far from the bright lights of the stage. Born in 1947 in Outlan, Mexico, he grew up in a home where music wasn't just a passion, it was survival. His father, a respected mariachi violinist, introduced him to the world of melody and rhythm at an early age. Carlos learned by ear, mimicking the notes his father played, his small hands struggling to master the strings. Music was the family's foundation, but life in Mexico was hard. Money was always tight, and dreams of a better future seemed distant. When Carlos was 8, his family uprooted their lives and moved to Tijuana, a border town pulsing with energy and uncertainty. It was there, amidst the chaos of the streets, that his love for music took a new direction. One day, as he wandered through a local plaza, he stumbled upon a band performing live. The group, known as the TJs, played with a raw intensity that stopped him in his tracks. The sound of electric guitars, pounding drums, and bluesy notes filled the air. Nothing like the traditional mariachi music he had grown up with. It was electrifying. That moment changed everything. He became obsessed, spending hours listening to American rock and blues records smuggled across the border, studying every note, every riff, dreaming of the day he could create that same magic. But Tijuana was no paradise. Beneath the neon lights and tourist-filled streets, darkness lurked. For 2 years, Carlos lived a nightmare no child should ever endure. A man, an American who seemed kind, who offered him gifts, toys, and trips across the border, was hiding monstrous intentions. What started as small favors turned into something unspeakable. Trapped in a cycle of fear and confusion, Carlos felt powerless, unable to escape. The abuse continued until one violent moment changed everything. One day, after Carlos simply glanced at a woman through a window, the man snapped, striking him with sudden, blinding rage. It was the last time Carlos saw him. The cycle ended, but the wounds remained. For years, guilt and shame followed him like shadows, whispering that he had done something wrong, that he had let it happen. He buried the pain deep, telling no one, pretending it never happened. Music became his escape, his sanctuary. By his early teens, he was finding his own way in the world, using his guitar to drown out the memories he couldn't erase. With nowhere else to turn, he took a job playing in the unlikeliest of places, Tijuana's seedy strip clubs. It was a rough environment for a young boy. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and desperation, the laughter of drunken men echoing through dimly lit rooms. Women danced under flashing neon lights, living lives Carlos barely understood. It was here that he saw things no child should witness: violence, corruption, and police brutality. One night, he watched as a local officer abused a woman, striking her as the crowd looked away. Carlos realized then that survival meant learning to navigate a world where power and cruelty went hand in hand. But the music, Oh, the music was something else entirely. Each night, Carlos played his guitar, experimenting with sounds, mixing the Latin rhythms of his childhood with the blues he had fallen in love with. He absorbed everything, from the fiery passion of mariachi to the raw soul of B.B. King and Muddy Waters. His fingers danced across the strings, weaving a sound that was uniquely his own. These clubs, dark and unforgiving, unknowingly became his first stage, his first real audience. And despite the chaos around him, Carlos found solace in the music, losing himself in the chords, the rhythms, the energy that pulsed through every performance. Tijuana shaped him in ways he never expected. It gave him pain, but it also gave him purpose. It exposed him to the harshest realities of life, yet gifted him a sound that no one else had. The boy who had once been lost in fear was now finding his voice through the strings of his guitar. He didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning of a journey that would take him from the shadows of his past to the heights of rock and roll history. At 17, Carlos Santana left behind the smoky clubs of Tijuana and crossed into the United States, chasing a dream that felt just out of reach. His family had settled in San Francisco's Mission District, a place buzzing with the energy of immigrants, artists, and struggling musicians. The city was alive, but for Carlos, survival came first. He had no money, no real plan, just his guitar and a determination to make something of himself. Days were spent washing dishes at the Tick-Tock drive-in, scrubbing plates for hours on end, his hands aching from the endless work. The pay was barely enough to survive, but Carlos had a goal. He was saving for two things: his immigration papers and a brand new Stratocaster guitar. Every dollar he earned was tucked away carefully, a step closer to freedom, a step closer to his dream. Then, just like that, everything was gone. One night, he came home to find his savings missing. $300, money that had taken him months to earn, had disappeared. Confused and desperate, he turned to his mother, hoping for answers. Her response cut deeper than he ever imagined. She had taken the money, spent it on his sister's dental work. It wasn't cruelty, just survival. But for Carlos, it felt like a betrayal. He had worked so hard, suffered so much, and in an instant, it was all gone. When he confronted her, she handed him a single $20 bill, her way of making it right. But Carlos didn't feel right. He felt lost. With nothing left to hold on to, he made a decision. He packed what little he had and walked away, stepping out into the night, not knowing where he was going, only that he couldn't stay. He went back to Tijuana for a while, playing in bars, trying to earn enough to start over. But the city no longer felt like home. He had outgrown it. The only path forward was back in San Francisco, back to the struggle, back to the uncertainty. When he returned, life didn't get any easier. He found himself in a cramped, run-down apartment with other musicians, barely scraping by. They slept on the floor, bodies packed together in the tiny space, sharing whatever food they could find. Most nights, dinner was nothing more than rice and beans, cheap, filling, and all they could afford. But hunger wasn't the only thing gnawing at him. His guitar, his lifeline, was falling apart. Strings snapped, wood chipped, and with no money for repairs, he played on broken strings, making do with whatever he had. But he refused to give up. When he wasn't working or trying to keep his guitar from falling apart, he played on the streets. Fisherman's Wharf, Union Square, anywhere people gathered, anywhere he could make a few dollars. Some days, he barely made enough to eat. Other days, he played for hours and left with just a handful of change. It was humbling, exhausting, and at times humiliating. Yet the streets became his classroom. He listened to the jazz musicians who performed in the city's parks, absorbing their rhythms, their improvisation, their soul. He watched folk singers and blues guitarists, learning from every note, every melody. He began mixing those sounds with the Latin influences he had grown up with, crafting something new, something different. The struggle was real, but so was the music. San Francisco was breaking him down, but at the same time, it was building him up, shaping him into the musician he was destined to become. Every hardship, every sacrifice, every sleepless night spent strumming a battered guitar was leading him toward something bigger. He just didn't know it yet. By 1966, Carlos Santana had spent years struggling, washing dishes, playing for pocket change, and sleeping on floors. But through it all, he had held on to his dream. He didn't just want to play music. He wanted to create something new, something alive. That year, fate intervened. While working at a diner, he met Tom Fraser, a fellow musician who saw something special in Carlos. Fraser introduced him to keyboardist Greg Rowley, and together they started piecing together a band. They brought in bassist David Brown, percussionist Marcus Malone, and drummer Rod Harper. They didn't have a plan, just a sound, a fusion of Latin rhythms, blues, and rock unlike anything else at the time. The band needed a name. Some threw out wild ideas, but Michael Carabello, a conga player who later joined, had a simple suggestion: Santana. It was memorable, powerful, and carried the energy of their leader. And just like that, the Santana Blues Band was born. They started playing in small clubs across San Francisco, earning a reputation for their explosive live shows. The music wasn't just heard, it was felt. The pounding percussion, the hypnotic guitar solos, the raw energy, it was electric. But they were still nobodies in the grand scheme of things. That all changed thanks to one man, Bill Graham. Graham was one of the most powerful concert promoters in the world, a man who could make or break a band with a single decision. He saw something in Santana, something raw and undeniable. He started booking them at the Fillmore, giving them exposure, believing they were destined for greatness. Then, in 1969, Graham did the unthinkable. Woodstock was shaping up to be the biggest music festival in history, with a lineup packed with legends: Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, The Who, and the Grateful Dead. Santana, at the time, had no major record, no hit songs, no reason to be there. But Graham made a deal with the festival organizers. If they wanted his other big acts, they had to take Santana, too. It was a gamble, and nobody expected much from them. Carlos and his band arrived at Woodstock as complete unknowns. They weren't even supposed to play until late that night, giving them time to settle in. But then, everything changed. Just after arriving, Carlos ran into Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead. Garcia offered him something: mescaline or maybe peyote, something strong, something otherworldly. Thinking he had hours before their set, Carlos took it. But plans shifted. Before he knew it, he was being pushed on stage in front of 400,000 people. And he was peaking. The world twisted, colors bled together, and his guitar, the very thing he had spent his life mastering, morphed before his eyes. It wasn't a guitar anymore. It was alive. It was a serpent, coiling and writhing beneath his fingers. Panic surged through him. How was he supposed to play when his instrument was moving, shifting, fighting against him? He had no choice. Eyes closed, hands steady, he surrendered to the music. Every note became instinct, every movement a prayer. He gritted his teeth, praying to God to guide him, to help him make it through without collapsing in front of a sea of people. And somehow, he did. The band played like they had never played before, the drums pounding like a heartbeat, the guitars wailing in perfect chaos. When they finished, the crowd erupted. In those 45 minutes, everything changed. Santana had arrived. 2 weeks later, their debut album dropped. Suddenly, they weren't just a local act. They were a national sensation. Their song Evil Ways shot up the charts. Radio stations couldn't get enough of their sound. And Bill Graham's bet had paid off in ways even he couldn't have imagined. Carlos Santana had gone from washing dishes to performing one of the most legendary sets in rock history. Woodstock wasn't just a performance, it was a miracle. And it was only the beginning. Fame came fast and hard for Carlos Santana. After Woodstock, his life transformed overnight. The Santana Band became a powerhouse, filling arenas, topping charts, and revolutionizing rock with their signature fusion of Latin, blues, and jazz. By the early 70s, Carlos wasn't just a musician. He was an icon. But with success came chaos, and in the whirlwind of touring, recording, and endless nights on the road, he found something, or rather, someone, who brought him a sense of balance. In 1973, Carlos met Deborah King, the daughter of legendary blues musician Saunders King. She was different from the women who drifted in and out of the music scene, smart, focused, and grounded. They connected quickly, and before long, they were married. But Deborah wasn't just his wife. She became his anchor. As Carlos navigated the unpredictable world of fame, she managed the details. She handled the business side of his career, ensuring that the fortune he was building didn't slip through his fingers like it had for so many other rock stars. Together, they built a life. They had 3 children, Salvador, Stella, and Angelica, each growing up in the shadow of their father's legacy. While Carlos toured the world, playing to millions, Deborah kept everything running behind the scenes. By the 1990s, when Santana's career had hit a lull, she helped rebuild what was slipping away. Without her, Carlos later admitted, he might have lost everything. But even the strongest foundations can crack. Despite their deep bond, Carlos was living 2 lives. On stage, he was a legend. Off stage, he was hiding secrets. For years, he struggled with infidelity, indulging in the temptations that fame so easily provided. He thought he could keep it buried, but the truth has a way of surfacing. In 2005, Deborah released her memoir, Space Between the Stars. It was raw, personal, and brutally honest, and in it, she revealed what Carlos had spent years trying to ignore: his betrayals, his dishonesty, and the damage it had done to their marriage. The book was a turning point. The cracks that had been forming for years split wide open. Carlos had to face what he had done, not just to Deborah, but to their family, to himself. He publicly admitted his failures, expressing deep regret for the pain he had caused. But some wounds don't heal with apologies. In 2007, after 34 years of marriage, Deborah filed for divorce. The woman who had been by his side through it all, the highs, the lows, the struggles, the victories, was gone. The loss shattered him. Everything he had built, everything he had taken for granted, was gone in an instant. The guilt, the loneliness, the emptiness, it consumed him. He spiraled into a darkness deeper than anything he had ever known. And in that darkness, he came to a terrifying conclusion. He didn't want to go on. 7 times. 7 moments where the pain became too much. 7 nights where he stood on the edge, ready to end it all. Each time, he felt trapped, drowning in regret, convinced that nothing was left for him. But something beyond his understanding, kept pulling him back. A voice, soft but undeniable, whispering, "I'm here. You are not alone." One night, as he sat in despair, he lit a candle and stared at a picture of Jesus. He prayed, not for fame, not for fortune, but for clarity, for peace, for a reason to keep going. Slowly, the weight on his chest began to lift. The pain was still there, but so was something else. Hope. Carlos Santana had spent his life chasing music, chasing success, chasing something he could never quite name. But in his lowest moments, he realized what truly mattered. It wasn't the fame, the money, or the legacy. It was love. And if he wanted to find it again, he had to start with himself. Carlos Santana's life had always been intertwined with the search for something greater, something beyond fame, beyond music, beyond himself. From the moment he first picked up a guitar, he believed there was more to existence than what could be seen or touched. But his journey of faith was never simple. It was a winding road filled with devotion, doubt, and discovery. In the 1970s, as his fame skyrocketed, Carlos found himself drawn to the teachings of Sri Chinmoy, an Indian spiritual guru who promised enlightenment through meditation, discipline, and selfless service. Under Chinmoy's guidance, Carlos changed his life. He stopped drinking, cut ties with distractions, and dedicated himself to a higher purpose. The guru gave him a new name, Devadip, meaning the lamp, light, and eye of God. For nearly a decade, Carlos followed this path, believing he had found the peace he had always longed for. But over time, cracks began to form. He started questioning the teachings, the rules, the expectations. Chinmoy urged him to live a life of celibacy and total devotion, but Carlos felt a growing disconnect between the guru's words and his own truth. Music, love, and passion were all part of who he was, and denying them felt like denying himself. In 1982, he made a painful decision. He walked away from Chinmoy's guidance, choosing instead to forge his own spiritual path. For years, his faith drifted, lost in the chaos of fame, success, and personal failures. But after his divorce and the deep depression that followed, something from his past began to resurface, something he had buried for decades. The memories of what had happened to him as a child, the abuse he suffered, the shame he carried, it all came rushing back, demanding to be faced. For so long, he had tried to forget. He had convinced himself that silence was strength, that moving forward meant leaving the past behind. But now, he understood the truth. Healing only comes when you confront the pain. He sat with the memories, relived the moments he had tried to erase, and finally, after all these years, he spoke them out loud. But acknowledgement wasn't enough. The pain still clung to him like a shadow, refusing to let go. And then, one night, in the stillness of his home, he heard a voice. Not from the past, not from his own mind, but something beyond. It wasn't anger or sorrow that filled him, but an overwhelming sense of release. A message, simple but profound. Forgiveness is freedom. He didn't forgive to excuse. He didn't forgive to forget. He forgave because he refused to let his past define him any longer. He chose to let go, to break free from the chains that had bound him for so long. This journey led him back to faith, but this time, on his own terms. In 1992, Carlos Santana became a born-again Christian, not because someone told him to, but because he had finally found the peace he had been searching for his entire life. He saw the world differently now, not as a place of suffering, but as a place of infinite possibility. In his darkest moments, he had believed he was alone, but now he knew the truth. He had never been alone. He had always been guided, always been protected, always been loved. And with that knowledge, he was finally ready to move forward, not just as a musician, but as a man reborn. By the late 1990s, Carlos Santana was a legend, but a fading one. His name still carried weight, his talent never in question. But the music industry had changed. The radio wasn't playing his songs. The younger generation barely knew his name. His last real hit had been decades ago, and record executives saw him as a relic of the past. His career, once unstoppable, had stalled. Then came Clive Davis. The same man who had signed Santana to Columbia Records in the late 60s saw something others didn't. He believed that Carlos wasn't finished, that his music still had the power to reach people. But to make a comeback, it couldn't just be about nostalgia. It had to be something fresh, something explosive. Davis had a vision, an album that bridged generations, blending Santana's unmistakable guitar with modern voices that could bring his sound to a whole new audience. That album would become Supernatural. Davis assembled a powerhouse team, bringing in top artists to collaborate. Lauryn Hill, Eric Clapton, Wyclef Jean, all of them eager to be part of something special. But the album still needed a defining track, a song that could ignite the charts. That song almost never came. The song that would change everything, Smooth, wasn't even on Santana's radar at first. It started as a rough demo called Room 17, a song about a late-night encounter in a hotel room. It was catchy, but something was missing. Enter Rob Thomas, the lead singer of Matchbox 20. Thomas was living a laid-back life in Manhattan when he got the call. The label wanted him to rework the song and turn it into something bigger. He rewrote the lyrics, shifting the focus from a wild night in a hotel to a story about an irresistible woman. The energy changed, the melody took shape. But one problem remained. Santana wasn't convinced. It took a personal appeal from Clive Davis to make him reconsider. Davis told Carlos to listen to the song again, to feel it, to hear the magic in it. Reluctantly, Carlos gave it another shot. This time, something clicked. The groove, the fire, the pulse. It was undeniable. But there was one condition. Santana insisted that the track be recorded live, with the band playing together in the studio, not pieced together digitally. He believed music had to be organic, had to breathe. And so, with everyone in one room, they recorded Smooth. The result was a tsunami. Smooth didn't just become a hit, it became the hit. It dominated the charts, spending 12 consecutive weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It was the last #1 song of the 1990s and the first of the 2000s, making it a bridge between two eras. It stayed in the top 10 for 30 weeks and on the charts for over a year. Everywhere you turned, Smooth was playing, on the radio, in commercials, in movies. Santana was no longer just a legend from the past. He was the biggest artist in the world again. And then came the awards. At the 2000 Grammy Awards, Santana made history. Supernatural won 9 Grammys, tying Michael Jackson's record for the most wins in a single night. Album of the Year, Record of the Year, Best Rock Album. Santana was everywhere, holding trophy after trophy, proving that his music wasn't just timeless, it was unstoppable. Carlos Santana's comeback wasn't just about reclaiming success, it was about defying expectations, proving that passion and talent have no expiration date. After decades in the industry, after personal struggles, after nearly fading into obscurity, he had done the impossible. He had reinvented himself without losing who he was. Supernatural wasn't just an album, it was a resurrection. And Santana, once again, was on top of the world. Carlos Santana has never been one to shy away from speaking his mind. But in 2023, his words sparked a firestorm he never expected. During a concert in Atlantic City, he paused between songs to share his thoughts on gender and identity, an unscripted 15-minute speech that would soon spread across the internet like wildfire. His words were met with immediate backlash. The audience reaction was mixed, but once the footage went viral, the criticism became impossible to ignore. Santana had always believed in speaking from the heart, but this time his message struck a nerve. Advocacy groups condemned his remarks, fans voiced their disappointment, and the controversy quickly became bigger than the music itself. Realizing the weight of his words, Santana issued a public apology, acknowledging that his comments had hurt people. He expressed regret, saying he had always aimed to spread love and unity, not division. But just as quickly as the apology appeared, it was gone, deleted, replaced instead with a cryptic message about consciousness and energy. It left many questioning where he truly stood, and the debate over his words continued long after the concert ended. While the controversy dominated headlines, another battle was unfolding, one far more personal. Santana had spent decades pouring his energy into music, pushing his body to the limit, refusing to slow down. But in 2024, his health forced him to stop. It started with discomfort, then persistent pain, until finally, doctors gave him news he couldn't ignore. He needed emergency surgery. He had no choice but to cancel several major shows, including highly anticipated performances in Albuquerque and Phoenix. For someone who had spent a lifetime on stage, stepping away, even temporarily, felt impossible. But there was no other option. His body was demanding rest, and this time he had to listen. Despite the setbacks, Santana wasn't finished, not even close. At 77, while most artists his age had long since retired, he remained unstoppable. His Las Vegas residency, An Intimate Evening with Santana, Greatest Hits Live, had already been running for over a decade. And even after surgery, even after the controversy, even after everything, he wasn't ready to walk away. The residency was extended into 2025, proving that no matter what challenges came his way, Santana would always find his way back to the stage. Through ups and downs, triumphs and missteps, one thing remained unchanged: Carlos Santana's passion for music. His journey had never been perfect, never smooth, never without struggle. But if there was one thing he had proven time and time again, it was this: nothing could silence him. Not controversy, not pain, not even time itself. Carlos Santana's journey has never been just about music. It's been about something deeper. A mission to inspire, to heal, to remind people that they carry their own light. Through every struggle, every triumph, every note played, his message has remained the same: love, unity, and the power of the human spirit. Few artists have stood the test of time like Santana. He is one of the only musicians, alongside the Rolling Stones, to have a top 10 album in every decade since the 1960s. His legacy isn't just written in records sold or awards won, it's in the lives he's touched, the souls he's awakened. As he looks ahead, his message to the world is simple: embrace who you are, stand in your truth, let your spirit shine, and in his own words, celebrate your own light. You are divine.